Hey guys, you're welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial, we'll be looking at this white leg palazzo. So I will cut it on the pattern first. So I've gotten the margin of 3.5 inches from the mid front. I measured 3.5 inches inwards, and at the top edge there I use about ½ inch as the margin just to get the shoulder line. On the shoulder line, I am placing 3.5 inches for my neck width, and the neck depth is 7 inches. I'll connect it as a V-neck, okay, and then on the shoulder line again I'll place a half of my shoulder measurement minus 1 inch. So a half of my shoulder measurement is 8 inches minus 1 inch is 7 inches. At that point, I'll go down with 1 inch and then I'll connect it to meet the neck width. At my shoulder slope, I'll place about 6.5 inches because I don't want it too wide, as we'll be having enough room around there when we slash and spread. So I use 6.5 inches from my shoulder slope downwards. I'll then at that point draw out an horizontal line for my chest line. I'll place a quarter of the bust circumference there plus 1 inch for seam allowance. Then get the midpoint of this chest line. From the shoulder slope to the chest line, I get the midpoint of it and I'll mark ½ inch inwards. Then using my pattern master, I'll connect the shoulder slope to the chest line like so. So I'll measure the half length of 16 inches from the shoulder line. I measure 16 inches downwards. At that point, I am drawing an horizontal line. On that horizontal line, I'll be marking a quarter of my waist circumference plus 1 inch for seam allowance. So I don't need that at this point because there will be a slash and spread method later. So we'll have enough room, so you can even use this palazzo with ease without zipper. So I am connecting chest line to the half length. So I got the midpoint of that waist circumference, that's 1/8 for my dart position, and I marked 11 inches from my shoulder line for my bust point, and then I drew that out horizontally because I'll be creating a bust dart later. So I created my waist dart, though we will not use this. Okay, ½ inch on both sides after the dart position. For the bust dart, I use about 1.5 inches. I mark it upwards because we have enough room from the chest line to where we have the bust point. So now from the half length there, I'll mark 9 inches downwards for the hip line. And then I'll place a quarter of my hip circumference of 11 inches plus 1 inch for seam allowance. So I'll connect what I have on my half length. I'll connect what I have there to the hip line, okay, and then blend out that sharp edge. So for my crotch, I'll be using about 6 inches. This because it's a very free palazzo, so I want to use 6 inches. So not to have any kind of tightness around the crotch. So from your hip line, you measure 6 inches downwards. And at that point, I'm drawing an horizontal line. And then I'll create the crotch extension of about 2.75 inches. Okay, so normally my crotch extension is 2.2. But because we're making a palazzo, I added ½ inch and then I have 2.75. Okay, so now I draw an horizontal line just to extend the crotch line. Okay, and at that point I went down with ½ inch. Then I'll use the cuff part of my pattern master. From that ½ inch, I am connecting it to meet the margin line that we created earlier. So that's for the crotch. And then I'll use that same measurement of 2.75 all the way to the length of this palazzo. I'll connect the dot, from the crotch there to the length. and then I will place a quarter of my hip circumference, exactly what I have on my hip line. I'll place it there plus 1 inch for seam allowance. I'll connect what I have on my hip line to the crotch line like so, and I'll use that same measurement all the way to the length of this palazzo. So now the length of this palazzo, I use about 56 inches plus 2 inches for hemming allowance. After that, I'll cut out this pattern. So I'll cut out the side, the arm curve and the shoulder line. Now from the margin we have there, I am creating ½ inch, which will serve as a seam allowance for the front panel, and even when we cut out the back panel. So I'm connecting the dots for the ½ inch there, and I join it to the neckline, and then I'll be cutting it from the crotch to the neckline, and then cut out the neckline. So I'll cut out what I have around the crotch there, and then I'll extend the dart position. I'll extend the dart position to the length. At that point, we'll be slashing it open. And then I'll need to cut out, to cut open the bust dart and place it like so, using my sellotape to put it in one spot. Okay, and then I'll trim out whatever excess I have there. Now the bust dart is so that you can spread it as wide as you want. Okay, so now I am placing it on this fabric. I use about 3 yards. Okay, so I cut out exactly the same thing, and just so I will know what I am spreading for the front panel, I am cutting the back panel first. At the crotch line there, I am extending it with 3 inches. I'll use my pattern master and just connect that point to blend into the length. Okay, and then use the cuff part now to blend to extend it to the crotch there. So that's for the crotch for the back panel. Okay, I'm cutting the back panel first, so we'll know what we are spreading. And because I used 3 yards, okay, so now this is what we have. And for the back panel, I'll make it 1 inch higher at the shoulder line and ½ inch wider at the arm cuff. I'm connecting that, and the neck depth for the back panel is deeper than the one we have in front. So now I'll simply fold the pattern a little aside. Okay, and from the neck width will be the same thing with the front neck width. I'll connect it to meet the new neck depth I have there, which is about 11 inches from the shoulder line. I measured 11 inches downwards from the shoulder line. So I'll connect the neck width to that point. I am simply trying to, create that ½ inch that I have there for that neckline. Okay. So apart from this, the shoulder line, the arm curve, and this back neck depth, every other thing will be the same thing with the front panel. Okay, so I am cutting it out from the shoulder line, the arm curve, the back neckline. Okay, and then I'm taking it out all the way to the crotch. And then I cut out the side all the way to the length, and the crotch part too all the way to the length. Now for the slash and spread part, I use about 9.5 inches, and I'll connect the 2 points, the 2 spreading points to the other, and then cut it out like this. So this is for the back panel, and I placed that pattern on another 1.5 yards of fabric, and this time I am cutting exactly what I have on the pattern for the front panel. Okay, So we simply drafted the front pattern so we can use it to cut the back. All right. I joined the midpoint, the center front and the center back. This palazzo will not have a zipper. So before I join the mid back and the mid front, okay, I use bias to turn out the neck. So after turning out the necklines, I now, stitch that mid front and stitch the mid back separately. So when I'm done with that, I am bringing the two together and I'll join it at the shoulder with 1/2 inch. I'll take out the seam allowance of 1 inch, okay? And because I want to, to insert an inside pocket, I'll be measuring from my chest line, from the arm cuff there. I'll measure 9 inches downwards. At that point, I'll notch. And for the pocket opening, I'll be using about 7 inches. So from that first notch, I will measure 7 inches downwards and make another notch. After making the second notch, remember we have 7 inches as the opening. So I cut out 8 inches width fabric and about 14.5 inches long. Now I use the 8 inches part to the pocket opening, and I'll make sure that 1/2 inch of it sticks out from the notches, okay? On both sides, where we have the notch, I'll leave about 1/2 inch of this pocket, this fabric I cut, 1/2 inch on both sides of the notch. So I'll take it to the front and then pin it as well to the back panel. I'll pin it so it will be easy when we take it to the machine. And when we take it to the machine, I will simply sew it down to attach it to these panels, okay, leaving about 1/2 inch at the edge there. I'll do the same thing to the front as well. I'll leave 1/2 inch, meaning I am sewing from one notch to the other notch, leaving 1/2 inch, so I will now use it to seal up the sides for the pocket. So now the way you place it, you're making it right side facing the right side. And then I'll take out the seam allowance after attaching this pocket of 1 inch. I'll stop stitch it a little after the notch and a little before the notch, a little before the second notch. I'll stop stitch it so to make it firm, and then take out the seam allowance all the way to the length. After that, we will need to bring the two crotches together, the front crotch and the back crotch. So I'll turn this inside out just to make it easy for us. And then I'll bring the two notches together. Now remember, after joining the mid back and the mid front, you need to iron it. Give it a good press and then bring the two together, pin it, and you will use about 1/2 inch to sew it on both sides. From that crotch, you sew it to the left, and you're using the same seam allowance to sew it to the right. Hope you understand. So now we are done sewing that, and I hemmed the palazzo. Whenever I'm working with flare, I like to use double folding for the hemming. So after hemming that, we'll need to work on the sleeves now. So I'll measure from the arm cuff. I'm measuring about 2.5 inches inwards. I'll give it a notch at that point. And then I'll measure from one notch to the other notch. And whatever I have, I will multiply it by 2 inches. Okay, because we'll be doing gathers for these sleeves, okay? So I'll measure one notch to the other and multiply it by 2. So what I have here was 17.5 inches. So I'll be multiplying that by 2, and I have 35 inches. So I added 1 inch to this, and then I cut the length of 36 inches. Okay, and then the width of it, I made it about 3 inches. I will double fold the edge for the 2 sleeves, okay, and then fold the length into 2. Get the midpoint of this, notch it, and then at the other edge they are going to up with about 1/2 inch and cuff it to meet the length. So I made 2 stitches for gathers and I gathered it. So for the arm cuff now, I got the midpoint and I notched it. And remember the notch we made on the sleeves. So I like to, whenever I'm working with gathers, I like to work with the midpoint. So I will not make the gathers just to one side, okay? So I will make the 2 midpoints come together. And then the sleeve length will stop at where we notch on the arm cuff. Where we notch on the arm cuff, so one side of it will go to the first notch and the other side to the second notch. So you pin this and then you take it to the machine and use 1/2 inch to sew it. After sewing it, I'll be taking out the stitches we made for the gathers just to give it a neat finishing, okay? I'll lose it and this is it. So after losing it, I'll use bias to turn it. So from where we have the side seam, I'll use the bias to turn it all the way around and top stitch. After top stitching, I am simply taking out whatever excess I have, so I'll be able to fold in the bias properly and neatly. So after that, I'll simply double fold the bias, okay, and then sew it all the way round the arm cuff. After sewing it, this is what we have, okay, and this is how it looked on me. So if this video adds any value to you, give me a thumbs up, share and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video.